Morality and the cut flowers. Problem. Murder, at its core, is an extreme moral wrong. To intentionally take a human life, whether that life belongs to a public figure or to vulnerable children in a school, violates not only the dignity of the individual, but the moral fabric that makes society possible in the first place. It is not merely a crime. It is a declaration that human life is negotiable. What makes this reality even more troubling is not only that such acts occur, but that at times they are celebrated, excused, or rationalized. When violence is justified because the victim held the wrong views or represented the wrong side, the damage goes far beyond the immediate loss of life. It erodes the shared moral ground that allows disagreement to remain human rather than tribal. In my own personal circles, both offline and online, I have not encountered anyone who commits or defends murder. That matters. It suggests that, at least close to home, the belief that killing is wrong still holds firm. The moral intuition remains alive. But when I look outward at the broader culture, I see something more fractured. Many people still believe, strongly and instinctively, that murder is wrong and that celebrating violence is abhorrent. Others, however, seem unsure. They hedge, they contextualize, they relativize. And that uncertainty raises a disturbing question. Are some of our most basic moral truths slowly fading? This question came into sharper focus for me while watching a discussion on Real Time with Bill Mahar, where Tim Alberta and Ben Shapiro joined Mahar for a wide-ranging debate. What struck me was not simply their disagreements, but the way they revealed a deeper tension beneath the surface. A disagreement not just about politics, but about where moral certainty itself comes from. Ben Shapiro made a claim that, on its face, sounded almost obvious, but carried significant weight. He argued that many of the moral beliefs shared by people like Bill Mahar, beliefs about human dignity, equality, and the wrongness of violence, did not emerge spontaneously. They are the product of a long cultural inheritance, shaped largely by Judeo-Christian moral teaching. Shapiro put it this way: Bill, you didn't hit a triple. You were born on third base. You inherited a set of moral assumptions that come from a religious tradition you now reject. You're living off the accumulated moral capital of a culture shaped by biblical values. Maher pushed back. He insisted that his moral reasoning works just fine without religion. He argued that empathy, reason, and shared humanity are sufficient. In his words, I don't need God to tell me that murder is wrong. I don't need an ancient book to inform my sense of right and wrong. I can look at the world, see suffering, and conclude for myself what is moral. Maher also questioned why he should give special authority to the Bible at all, pointing out passages he considers outdated, immoral, or inconsistent. From his perspective, morality progresses as religion loosens its grip, not the other way around. Shapiro's response was not a counterattack. It was a metaphor, and it was devastating in its simplicity. Because cut flowers die, he said. You can take the flower out of the soil, put it in a vase, and for a while it looks beautiful. But eventually, without its roots, it withers. The question isn't whether you can have morality without religion for a time. The question is whether it can survive across generations once it's severed from its source. That metaphor deserves careful attention. A cut flower does not immediately look dead. In fact, it may look vibrant for days. But it is living on borrowed time. Its beauty is sustained by what remains from its connection to the roots it no longer has. Shapiro's claim is not that atheists cannot be moral or that secular people lack compassion. His claim is that the moral intuitions many of us take for granted, like the inherent value of every human life, did not arise in a vacuum. They were cultivated, protected, and transmitted through religious traditions that treated human dignity as sacred rather than negotiable. This brings us to the heart of the issue. Can a moral system that rejects transcendence sustain itself indefinitely? Can it renew itself across generations, especially in moments of stress, resentment, or tribal conflict? Or does it depend, quietly and invisibly, on moral assumptions it no longer knows how to defend? When violence is excused because the victim is unpopular, when killing is contextualized as understandable, when speech is met with intimidation rather than argument, These are not just political failures, they are moral failures, and they suggest that the flower may already be wilting. So here is the question we must ask honestly. Is the moral framework articulated by people like Bill Mahar sustainable over time? Or is it a cut flower, still attractive, still persuasive, but slowly losing its vitality as the soil that once nourished it is discarded? And now, I want to offer a response. History suggests that societies do not sustain moral seriousness on abstraction alone. Empathy is powerful, but it is fragile. Reason is essential, but it is easily bent by self-interest. Shared humanity is real, but it often collapses under fear, scarcity, or ideological fervor. What has consistently renewed moral commitment across generations is not merely agreement, but worship, not merely values, but a vision of the human person as accountable to something higher than the state, the crowd, or the self. Christianity, whatever one thinks of its institutions or adherents, offers such a renewing structure. It grounds human dignity not in usefulness, popularity, or power, but in the claim that every person bears the image of God. It teaches that life is sacred even when it is inconvenient, broken, or opposed. It insists that violence is not merely impractical, but sinful. Most importantly, Christianity does not rely on moral optimism. It assumes human fallibility. It expects moral failure. And because of that, it builds in mechanisms for repentance, forgiveness, and renewal, things that purely secular moral systems often struggle to explain or sustain. Without roots, moral language becomes hollow. It remains emotionally compelling for a time, but increasingly vulnerable to reinterpretation, manipulation, and erosion. The cut flowers problem is not whether morality can exist without religion today. It clearly can. The problem is whether it can survive tomorrow and the day after that, when the cultural memory of its origins fades and the pressures on it increase. That is why these conversations matter. This channel exists to think about these questions seriously, not to silence disagreement, but to invite it, not to demand consensus, but to encourage reflection. I don't expect agreement. I do hope for engagement. If you have thoughts, objections, or insights, I invite you to share them in the comments. Let's test these ideas together, honestly and thoughtfully, while we still can.